Hi, this is Cassie Brighter, and this is Empowered Trans Woman. With me today, I have Alexandria Holder, who's a trans advocate that I recently connected with online, and I was fascinated to hear her story. Hi, Alexandria, how are you?
I am doing very well. How are you?
I'm all right. It's interesting. We're recording this during, hopefully, by the time somebody watches this video, this will be all behind us, but kind of at the really scary times because of COVID-19. So, yeah, living kind of in seclusion right now. And I'm a very social person, so it's a little bit of a challenge.
I am not a social person, but even this is very difficult for me because now I don't even have the option to go out.
Right, exactly. It's different when it's by choice, right?
Yes.
And you have a full family. How many kids do you have?
We have four children. So our
So they must be
eldest,
climbing the walls.
oh yes, our eldest, she's 11, and then we have a set of 6-year-old triplets.
Oh, yikes.
Yes, we love them very much, but they do keep us very busy.
I imagine. I had kids 2 years apart, and it was good to just catch your breath for a second before the next one shows up. So we'll definitely talk about family, but I wanted to start by talking a little bit about your career in the military. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So I enlisted back in 2004. So I've been
Mm-hmm.
in for just over 15 years now. And I enlisted as an Arabic linguist, and that's been my career for that entire time. I've spent most of it in Maryland at Fort Meade. Uh, but most of that time I was serving in the gender that I was assigned at birth. At birth, I was serving as a male with male dress and appearance standards, with male physical fitness standards, and that whole time, the military, the Air Force specifically, its core values are integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all we do. And I could nail those last two. I always put forth my best effort. I put the service before myself all the time. But that integrity part, I felt like I was living a lie because I couldn't be who I am. I couldn't serve openly as a transgender woman, and I had to hide that. And it wasn't until the period of open service started under President Obama in 2016 that I was finally able to show my true self and to live openly with full integrity. And I really welcomed that opportunity.
Let me ask you a question, which is how present was gender dysphoria in your life during prior to transition? Was it constant? Was it something that waned and flowed, or was it something that wasn't really that much in the forefront until some catalytic event kind of brought it to the forefront? What was your case?
So my dysphoria has really kind of come and go over the years. Like I first understood that I was transgender when I was about 7 years old. And back then, late 80s, I had never heard of the word transgender before. I hadn't heard of transsexual, the older term. That's no longer really in use. That wasn't something that was in the media. I had no internet, so I had no way to explain the feelings that I had. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it was very difficult for me to deal with those feelings. I felt like I was insane, for lack of a better word. And over the years, I went through puberty and I struggled a lot with the way that my body was developing because it just felt wrong. I
Mm-hmm.
felt completely uncomfortable with the way that I was growing, with the way my voice developed, with the broadening of my shoulders and, the body hair. And it was very difficult for me. And when
And what
all,
was your family of birth? What was their cultural heritage, your religious heritage?
so they are Christian, but they're not deeply involved with the religion. Um, and my parents, they were, and they still are, relatively conservative. I grew up conservative. I held
Mm-hmm.
a lot of those beliefs for quite a bit of my life. Um, and my mother, she's Korean, and the Korean culture, they've come a long ways, but they are also very traditional. So the concept of the LGBTQ plus community is very difficult for some of the older generation.
Makes
So
sense.
to this day, my dad is very accepting, and I love him very much. And my mother, she's struggling a little bit, but she has not cut me out of her life, which I greatly appreciate. And I'm hoping that through that continued connection, that I can lead her towards acceptance of who I am.
What led you to the Arabic language?
So whenever you join the military, at
Mm-hmm.
least this is how my experience went. They asked me to write down a list of languages that I would like to learn. So they said, here's this blank sheet of paper, put down your top 15 suggestions. Here's a list of your options. So I went through, I was like, I have Korean heritage. I'll put Korean at the top of the list. And it wouldn't be bad to learn Mandarin Chinese. And I put a long list on there. Arabic was nowhere near that list at all. I really didn't have any sort of appreciation for the Arabic language, but lo and behold, I got Arabic, and I really learned a deep appreciation for the language. It has a long history, and I really enjoy learning about the culture of the Arab world and the history. There's a lot going on there, especially since it's the cradle of civilization.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was recently talking with a Muslim trans woman who lives in the peninsula, and she was telling me of words that have existed in the Muslim world for transgender or for whatever their understanding of it was at the time, and it was interesting to me that these words are hundreds of years old. And so when people talk about, well, there's only men and women or Adam and Eve and all these kind of um, simplistic, essentialistic kind of views, it's interesting that you find that in ancient languages like Arabic, these words exist and these words have it's obviously been part of the culture forever.
Yes, I mean, other genders, even switching genders, that is a concept that exists in a lot of different cultures, and it's existed for thousands of years. And I'm sorry to those people that don't understand that, but that information is out there and it's readily available, and it's part of my mission to help spread that.
Yes, and I'm very thankful that you're doing that kind of a work. What year did you, and this is of course a little bit of a nebulous question in most cases, but when did you feel that you in earnest started your transition, and what were your first steps?
So really, I'm going to give a lot of credit to my wife, Brittany. She was the first person I was able to tell that I was transgender. And from the very beginning, she was accepting. She had been exposed to the LGBTQ, community in the past. She has an uncle that's gay, and she's experienced feelings of, bisexuality herself. So she was able to.
Which ends up being really convenient.
Yes, yes, very much so. So I told her about a month into our relationship. We had just started dating, and it was a very difficult conversation. I was driving. We had just come back from a date, and I pulled over to the side of the road. I was like, Brittany, there's something I have to tell you, and I don't want this to ruin our relationship, but I have to be completely honest with you. And so I came out and I told her, and I started crying, and she just reached out and she hugged me. And she said that she was going to be with me every step of the way. And she has been. From that
That's
point
pretty
on.
amazing. But it sounds like this was really early on in your dating.
Yes. So this was, I think, about 2008 or so.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really early on. This was after I had joined the military, struggled through that for a number of years. And then, we started dating, and she found ways to help me deal with the dysphoria. She helped me shave my legs for the very first time.
So that's so sweet.
We sat down on the floor of a stand-up shower, and she's like, okay, this is how you do it. Now be careful. And, I nicked my legs a couple of times and, had to deal with that. But she was so very accepting. She helped me pick out my first feminine clothing. She's helped me with makeup. She has been my biggest supporter.
That is so good. And it's interesting, I run a support group for spouses of trans people. And one concern that somebody raised recently is the fact that she married a man. She is not attracted to women. And now her spouse is more and more and more becoming a woman. And the way that she described it is her spouse's scent has changed, her spouse's demeanor has changed, and everything about the spouse has changed. And she's struggling with it because she's a heterosexual woman at heart. And it's something that fascinates me. To what extent is our sexuality malleable, and to what extent we can adapt? Um, I am deeply pansexual, so I don't really have a good grasp on what it's like to have desire for only one gender. But so, and this is kind of a prying question, so answer it to the extent that you're comfortable. But um, what can you tell me about the romance and the intimacy as the transition wore on? How difficult or how easy or how smooth was it to negotiate?
So, yes, this is a little bit of a personal question, but without going into too many details, um, because Brittany has been so supportive and so understanding, like we've read articles about the struggles of other couples, and she's been very aware of the changes that I've been going through. So she's been, very careful to ask me, hey, I know things are changing. How would you like to go through with this? How would you like to be intimate? And I do the same in return because she's now treating with somebody that's more visibly female. And, it does change things. So I think that constant communication has been very, very good. And, it's led to so far a very healthy and happy marriage with 4 children.
This is very good news, and you've touched on something which extends quite past the transgender experience, and it's just really good advice for sexuality in general, which is a lot more communication, and ask the other person what do they name their parts, what do they name their body parts, what do they name the different experiences that they're engaging in. The language matters a lot because we've all been taught words that resonate with us and make us feel comfortable, and we've all heard words that trigger us or insult us or make us feel uncomfortable. And also, what kind of experience brings you sexual satisfaction or even emotional fulfillment, which really varies throughout transition, and it varies just even in the lifespan of a regular cisgender person as well. So
No,
this is, I think that sometimes people who are outliers of society, like the people in the kink communities or the people in the LGBT communities, because of the fact that we are forced to be a little bit more observant and careful and more communicative, we stumble onto things which in cis straight normative world are kind of taken for granted to a detriment of the relationship.
yes. No, I definitely agree. That's, I've had a number of friends go through some difficulties in their relationships. And, I don't know if this is part of cisgender culture, but they found it very difficult to talk to their spouses, to open up, to have that open communication about, what they enjoy whenever they're intimate, or even things like terminology. It was a struggle for them to get to the point where they can talk to each other.
Yeah, it's actually pretty unfortunate that the United States in general is pretty sex negative compared to other cultures, and my European friends are constantly amazed at how little is taught in schools and the shame that children experience, and they're not familiar. Swedish people are not familiar with that at all. They're taught sexual education in first grade in school, and they come up with a very different experience. But So the pregnancy that you both have experienced, it happened after your transition, right?
So it happened prior to my medical transition.
Gotcha. But you were already socially presenting in your true
So
gender.
I was starting to socially present, but at that time there was not a period of open service. So I had to keep it very quiet because I didn't
Hmm.
want to lose my job.
Gotcha. I was curious because of the fact that I experienced my spouse's pregnancies while I was being understood as a man in society. And it was very hard. It was very lonely. I felt really sidelined. I felt it was very tangible to me that I was barren, um, and that the miracle of life was happening to her but not to me. And it was very hard to convey that into words because we weren't having those conversations back then. But you, I think, might have been a little bit more empowered because of the fact that the understanding was already there. Did you guys have those kind of conversations going into an ultrasound or coming back from a doctor's appointment?
Oh, very much so. I mean, that was one of the things that I told Brittany was that, I was really excited and I was looking forward to becoming a parent, but I miss having that opportunity to, have that child grow inside of me, to have that strong physical connection, to be that mothering, entity to a child. I think that, you know, the non-birthing parent adds a lot to a relationship and they're very, very important. But the nature of that relationship is different. And, I feel like that I've missed out and, it's unfortunate. It's just the way that I was born and I have to live with it. But that was something that we did discuss. So I was able to be honest with her about that.
I'm glad that you were able to have those conversations.
Mhm.
I am hoping that the nature of the relationship is not that similar. I think that it's different for us because we are the adult and we're watching from a vantage point. I think that to the child, who is of course not able to remember the pregnancy experience, it's just the two parents.
Yes. No, that it's interesting watching the dynamics in our children because I think they've chosen favorites. They don't all go to one parent. They will, have like each of them have their own favorite. And whenever they're injured or they're upset about something, they will choose their favorite parent to go to. And sometimes it's my wife, sometimes it's me. So, the children, they do their own thing.
They do, yes. Quite often it's a very pragmatic kind of a choice and a matter of convenience of what's going to get them what they want.
Yes, very much so.
A point of curiosity for me is, especially with your oldest, what does your kid call you? What does your kid refer to you as?
So that was something that we had a lot of thought about, and we included my eldest daughter in the decision because this was about 2 years ago whenever my appearance really started to change and it was getting more and more awkward to be called daddy out in public. People would look and be like, wait, daddy? That doesn't look like a daddy. So just to help smooth things socially, I was like, we should probably look at calling me something else. And so, we sat down, we talked to her, and it's like, okay, probably don't want to use mommy because we already have a mommy. What do you think? And so we ran through a few ideas. And what we ended up deciding was to kind of jam both mommy and Alex together. So Alexandria, and then it turned into Moxie, which also happens to be a word meaning like spirit and like excitement. So that tends to fit my role really well because I am the parent that gets down on the floor, gets all dirty with the kids, and I'm the one getting in there with the toys and doing all that. My wife, she's much more practical, which is a very good thing. She's the organizer and the planner, and the we each fit our roles very comfortably, and I think Moxie fit very well.
That sounds lovely. I had a funny experience because in researching what would be a good word for the kids to call me, we found a family with a trans parent in England where the kids referred to her as Bunny,
Mm.
like rabbit.
Yes.
And I thought that was cute, so we adopted it for a short while. But then Emma came from Boys and Girls Club and she was laughing out loud because she had been talking with her friends and she very absent mindedly said, "Well, my bunny always says that." And her friend said, "You have a rabbit that talks." So the terms don't always convey and don't always work exactly how you want them to.
Yes.
I've seen parents have many choices with that, and I think that younger generations are adopting more fluid words like that, like or an adaptation. Two close friends of mine are a gay couple, and one of them is a trans dad, and they're dad and papa,
Mm-hmm.
and that works really well. So a variation thereof. But it's interesting how we have to negotiate those things, and lesbian couples have those kind of challenges too.
Yeah.
Mama and mommy, or something like that. They usually fall into. So, what was the experience for your oldest daughter in terms of watching you transform?
So she always knew that I didn't identify as male. Like she would see me wear, dresses and put on makeup, and she didn't really ever think anything of it. She knew that I identified as female, and she was okay with that. But as she got older, I was like, I'm gonna change my name, and I am transgender, and I explained it to her, and she had a lot of difficulty with it at first. I mean, she was about 6 years old, because the biggest worry for her was that she was losing her daddy. I
Mm-hmm.
I reassured her, it's like, I'm not going anywhere. I am still the same person. I'm just going to be me. I'm going to be happier. I'm not going to have this huge weight on my shoulders that are keeping me from having the best relationship with you that I possibly can. So, I explained that to her, and she came to understand. And I think really the biggest, benefit for her was I told her that she could do my makeup and pick out clothes for me. So after that, she was sold.
Yeah, after all, she's gaining somebody for the girl team, so it works out.
Yes.
um, Going back now to the military experience, I'm really curious what it was like to transition while in the military.
So, like I said, I can only speak from my experience, but my transition was pretty much without any sort of obstacles at all.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I started transitioning in the fall of 2016, and I came out to my doctor, my primary care provider, and I was extremely nervous. I was wondering, oh, what is this young lieutenant going to say to me? Are they going to be, are they going to be upset? Are they going to be transphobic? Are they going to send me away and say, oh, I don't know anything about this, I can't treat you, and then just kind of leave me floundering? But from the very beginning, she was extremely accepting. And even though she didn't necessarily have all the knowledge that she needed, she was willing to do the research and help guide me through my transition. I came out to my chain of command. That was another stressful conversation,
Hmm.
but they were also extremely supportive. And I think I was very lucky in that I was at Fort Meade for quite a long time. I got there in 2006. So at that point, I had been there for about 10 years. So I had the opportunity to build up a positive reputation there, where I had this strong work history, a very strong work ethic. I had won a number of awards and decorations, and I was able to stand behind that and say, you accepted me whenever I was doing all this good work. You should be accepting me now. And I
Yeah, and
think
it's interesting strategically to think in terms of what is a good point to make a transition. Sometimes the helpful choice is to do it between jobs, to end one job, to take a breather, to take 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, catch your breath, update your LinkedIn profile, do all the paperwork, the legal paperwork, and then go to new interviews with your new name and gender. But when you have built equity of years and years of well-deserved praise and whatnot, then that could also be really beneficial. But even in a very accepting environment and in a positive environment like the one that you seem to be describing, when people have kind of assimilated an image of you and have experienced you in one gender for a really long time, and they develop certain expectations of how to refer to you and how to see you, I find that the people that misgendered me the most were the people that I've had long friendships with prior to transition, and my family. Whereas friends that I made after or during my transition had a much easier time with it. So I'm wondering what it was like for you in your job after having already kind of established all these relationships with one persona to now bring another one.
so. Luckily, whenever I went through transition, I'm a technical sergeant in E6, so on the enlisted scale, that's decently high up. So whenever you outrank a good 2/3 of a unit, it really helps quite a bit. So whenever I transitioned, changed my name, I got my exception to policy letter, so I was able to conform to female dress and appearance standards. So I started to wear makeup and I had earrings and I started to grow my hair out. I got a few double takes and I just explained to them, it's like, I'm transgender, I'm transitioning, and they were like, okay, all right, and they went with it. Um, I'm certain that a few of them have, not so positive opinions, but they weren't willing to voice that in front of me. There was one airman in particular that he was a little bit more conservative on Facebook, and I was able to talk to him a little bit. And he had some misperceptions about transgender people in the military, where he felt that, you know, people that are transgender and going through transition, they can't deploy for long periods of time, and they have problems with medication. And I was like, it, you've picked up a few misconceptions here. Is that, you know, look at the military policies. I have them right here, and I can explain to you. It's like we, are non-deployable for a very short amount of time, but we do our best to minimize that. And most trans people in the military, they choose not to go through surgery. And you look at these things, and we are not serving to the detriment of the mission. We are sitting there and we are actively supporting the national defense of our country. And
Which brings me straight on into Trump's ban of transgender people in the military. Um, a very strong point was non-deployability, and another strong point was the cost of the medical transitions. I think those were his two key narratives for the ban. Was there any other? Am I forgetting something?
he also mentioned the negative effect on morale.
Gotcha. Yeah, it was a great moment. By the way, I used to watch this show called The West Wing.
Yes.
I loved that show, and what they were discussing at the time, because this is maybe 10 years old, is they were discussing gay people in the military,
Mm-hmm.
and it was at the height of Don't Ask, Don't Tell,
Yes.
and there's a great scene where they're having a heated debate. You have maybe four people arguing for, four people arguing against, and it's going nowhere, and it's just one of those pointless kind of arguments. And Um, somebody, oh, I wish I knew this character a little, or I remember this character a little bit more clearly, but he's a four-star admiral. He's one of the president's top military advisors, and he's a black man. And he walks in, he just kind of, he hears about the meeting and he crashes the meeting. And he says, let me guess, so the argument is that it would be disruptive. And the argument is that it would affect morale. When we integrated the army and the armed forces with blacks and whites serving together, they said exactly the same things. And guess what? It was disruptive. And it did affect morale. And we got over it. And today, I'm a four-star admiral. Beat that with a stick.
Yes. So, no. And I just look at my own experiences, and none of the morale in my immediate circle has been negatively affected by me transitioning. But in fact, I think that it's actually increased because now I can perform to my best ability. I can add more to the mission. I can be a better supervisor, a better mentor. And I think that, looking at my yearly performance reviews, now I think that my last year's performance review is probably the best one I've ever had.
Oh, that's phenomenal. But also, it sounds to me like the environment and the essence of the armed forces in regards to, well, I'm going to be circuitous and I'm going to say just gender and sexuality in general, but to be a little bit more narrow, when I'm talking specifically is about toxic masculinity, has really kind of shifted, hasn't it? Because I've heard recently a friend of mine is going through basic training, and he's a cisgender male, and he was telling me about a very different experience than the caricature that one imagines from the outside. The barking and the yelling and the let's not show your feelings. It was quite the opposite. So I was very gratified to hear that.
I mean, there is still a degree of yelling and trying to get these, young people indoctrinated into the military culture.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there has been a very positive move away from that toxic masculinity, where we don't need to insult people just to get them to conform. We don't have to sit there and, curse at them or to take them out back and to beat some discipline into them. We don't need to do that because these things are not effective.
Because, yeah, what was it called with Jack Nicholson's A Few Good Men, Code Red or whatever?
Yes, because you look at these things and that physical discipline, it works at the immediate time scale, like it works right then and there. But then that person starts to build up these feelings of resentment, and next thing you know, it's these people have morale issues, they have more disciplinary issues, and they're the next person looking at separation or a court-martial, and that physical discipline leads to more issues than it solves. And I think the military has definitely learned that over the years. So we've moved in a very positive direction that's backed by science. And I really applaud the move that the armed forces has made.
It is my firm belief that at the heart of transphobia, there's homophobia, because men are terrified of penises. And at the heart of homophobia, there is misogyny. Ultimately, at the beginning of all this is just this concept that there is some kind of turf to be gained in maleness, and there's a demotion in femininity, and women being lower than men in society. So I think that the fact that women are serving proudly in the military nowadays, and the fact that we've made a lot of headway in terms of feminism in our society, is really, I mean, it's healthier for us, but I think it's also healthier for men, because I think that we are no longer expecting these toxically masculine kind of attitudes and behaviors and roles from them anymore, hopefully.
Now, things are getting better. They are not where I would like to see them. I think we still
Mm.
have a lot of room for improvement, but especially in the military, there is, I think, generally speaking, an equality of opportunity for both men and women. Um, it's a little bit more difficult if you're non-binary or agender. I don't think the military is quite there yet, but hopefully one day we will be.
Oh,
But
that's actually probably going to become an urgent conversation. Um, I had a really striking moment with my last partner, who is non-binary, where I was complaining about public restrooms, and I was kind of ranting, and they kind of sighed, and I turned to them and they said, "At least you have a bathroom." And it was a moment. It was a sober moment for me to realize to what extent they're not represented in society, and to what extent we need to make a major culture shift there to accommodate non-binary people.
yes, and my desire is to hopefully one day see a society where, I'm going to pull up the um, kind of a pulp science fiction film, Starship Troopers, where they had a very progressive co-ed shower scene that I don't know why the director decided to include that, but it was extremely progressive because you had people that it didn't matter what their gender was. They were all using the same facilities and there was mutual respect. They weren't putting each other down based upon appearance or gender. It was good camaraderie between people that were in the armed forces together.
I
And
thought that
I'm
was brilliant, and in general, I think that one of the big challenges in science fiction, it's easy to figure out how the shiny knob is going to look like, or what the beeping dial is going to look like on the display or whatnot. But the really big challenge in science fiction is to try to envision the changes in society. Um, Sometimes I'm watching a science fiction show and I cringe because the gendered attitudes are very 20th century. And some of the demeanors, and not maybe gendered, but maybe just the attitudes that like parents and children have, or things like that. They're very late 20th century, early 21st century, very palpably so. Whereas we easily can tell that 100 years ago that wasn't the case. 300 years ago that very much wasn't the case. Um, Kids talking back to a parent at the table, that's not something that existed in the 1950s. It's not something that existed in the
no.
1930s. So extrapolating from that, what would the 23rd century look like? What would the
Mhm.
25th century look like? And something like co-ed shower scene is, I think, a step of and a little nod of saying, don't expect society to stay the same in terms of these attitudes. So
Yes.
that was I caught that too. I thought it was a good moment. Um, Let me ask you this: in terms of your experience in the military, have you encountered other trans people? Have you encountered non-binary people in the military?
So yes, I have encountered a number of other trans people. By the Palm Center's estimate, there's approximately 15,000 of us serving across the different services. So chances are, you're going to run into one of us eventually, just because there's quite a few of us out there. And I've met quite a few through my advocacy work and through an organization called Sparta.
Oh
They have
yes,
yes,
I'm
and
familiar with it. I've interviewed at one point. I've interviewed Monica Helms and Bryn Tannehill, and Bryn is definitely a member.
yes. So, I've connected to a number of trans people through that organization, and it is incredible once you start to make yourself visible, the number of trans people that start coming out and seeking assistance and even just a connection. Uh, once I became public at Fort Meade, I got requests for friendship on Facebook. I had people send me emails at work. I had, even the local like first sergeants and commanders started to reach out to me to ask for assistance with their trans service members. It's like, hey, how do I support this person? It's like, I
But
am
now
so glad that you asked me.
let's talk about the Trump era, and you're talking about being really visible. You're talking about being a member of Sparta, and the fact that you're being approached about um, trans sensitivity and things like that. If I understand, and because of the fact that I'm not military, I don't know the particulars, but if I understand Trump's terms and vision for the armed forces, um, you would be out of that. You would be out of step because of the fact that you're not serving in your assigned gender at birth. So how does that not become a problem?
So when the latest ban came into effect, there was a grandfather clause where if you had a diagnosis that was confirmed by a military medical provider that you could be grandfathered in, you could go through transition and receive your transgender related care, and you could complete that transition while still in the military, and you wouldn't face any negative, uh, retaliation. You wouldn't face any issues because of that. And I
Mm-hmm.
fell into that group because whenever that policy came out and was finally set in stone, and it just went into effect last year in April. By that time, I had already completed my transition, as complete as you can complete a transition. I had already, gotten all my documentation and stuff set up. So I was very glad to see that clause in there because otherwise I would be out of a job and I would have difficulties supporting my family. But no, that's one of the things that I'm hoping that my visibility might help change one day to
Yeah, and
win
it's
over
good that you
hearts and
mentioned the
minds.
fact that it would be a difficulty because you would have a difficulty supporting your family. Because I have talked to people who have been discharged, who have found themselves out of employment after a prestigious career in the military because of the ban, and I've also met people, young people, who their hope and dream was to serve their country in the military, and they found themselves suddenly outsiders to that. So, in the current climate, what can a person expect who hasn't transitioned yet and who is what we call an egg, an unhatched trans person?
So unfortunately, if a person like that has that desire to serve their country, they're going to have to keep everything hidden. And it's very difficult. I did that for, 10 years of my career. I've known other people that have gone through, served 20 years, served 30 years, and they retired and they had to serve in their birth gender. And it is extremely unfortunate that these are the times that we live in.
Yeah.
And it's definitely possible to do that if a person's wish is to serve their country. There are resources out there to help deal with dysphoria while you are serving. There's
Mm-hmm.
plenty of, support groups and networks that can be there for that person. It's not an easy path at all. I don't want anybody to get that idea that it's easy to be in the military and be transgender, especially if you have to hide your transgender status. But it is definitely possible if that's what your desire is.
Yeah,
And I
it seems
know,
like in your case you had an extremely fortunate set of events and timing.
yes, no, I was very lucky, both, in the timing and in the environment that I transitioned in.
I have
The
a question to ask you, which is, um, I'm hoping that I'm going to be tactful, but I'm not a military person. I grew up in a military dictatorship in Argentina, and it kind of soured me against soldiers.
It's understandable.
And being a South American, I also grew up in a country that has been exploited by the United States, and so I stand against imperialism and things like that. So I can understand that the armed forces in the United States do a lot of good, but I also have a sense of the fact that the good that it does worldwide is questionable, and I'm wondering if um, you find yourself having to negotiate the ethics of that, of decisions, the political decisions, especially with this administration, decisions that it's making in the Middle East, in terms of to what extent this is part of, I guess, your career and your life, and how do you view that?
So the nice thing about the modern military is that they teach us from day one the importance of having those ethical standards. That not only does the military have its own standards, but each service member comes into the military with their own set of standards that they picked up from their parents, from their upbringings, from their religious backgrounds, and there may be times that those particular ethics are going to be challenged. I know with certain policies that not even just the current president, but President Obama and President Bush, some of those policies, they've been difficult for individuals to navigate. Things like, drone strikes on civilians, or, the going
Abu
to war in
Ghraib.
Iraq. Yes. So there have been a lot of difficult decisions, and some things that I've been a part of in my career that I'm like, I don't know if I feel entirely comfortable doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And
So how do you find that point of balance? How do you reconcile it all in your head?
so my biggest thing is being able to focus on things like force protection, where I'm protecting the U.S. service members that are currently deployed. I'm supporting and defending, United States civilians, and not even just United States civilians, but civilian populations in a number of different countries, allies of the United States. I very strongly believe in saving civilian lives. And in my job, that's one of the things that I hold very, very dearly. And if there's any sort of indication that, hey, we may have some sort of operation and there are civilians on the ground, I make that known, and I am very, very loud about it. And it's having people that can do that in the military, I think, is very, very important, to have those strong ethical, feelings, and that strong ethical backbone that can iterate that. I think we need more of those people.
Yes, that's a great answer. I appreciate you sharing that with me. How has your Arabic language helped you in your trans advocacy? Has it at all? Because I have found that being from an Arabic background and being trans is probably one of the most challenging situations.
So I have not had an opportunity to use my Arabic speaking skills for with my advocacy yet. I'm
Mm.
looking forward to that opportunity sometime in the future. I'm sure it will happen eventually. Um, it's just a matter of time. Our planet is slowly getting smaller and smaller due to social media and just the speed of our communications.
Mm.
Like just last year in December, I was interviewed by Voice of America's Russian affiliate. So people in Russia have seen my face, so they know who I am, and I don't speak a lick of Russian. But it's just a matter of time before, if you continue with advocacy work, your face is going to get known globally at some point. So if an Arab speaker ever has questions or wants to reach out, that's what I'm here for.
That's wonderful. Alexandria, what would be your parting words of wisdom? What would you like to convey, especially to a younger trans person or somebody who's just beginning their journey? What would you tell them?
So I think my probably greatest piece of advice is just to keep moving forward. It doesn't matter if you're taking large steps or leaps, or you're just shuffling forward. As long as you're moving in a forward direction, you're doing well. You're doing a lot better than a good portion of the population, where they may be sitting on the couch and not doing anything. They're not progressing. They're not learning. As long as you sit there and you do research online, or you start to follow, advocates, or you go to a convention, or, whatever it is that you do, as long as you progress and keep moving forward, you are doing extremely well.
I love that. I think that's really important to keep in mind, and it's important for us to pat ourselves in the back for the things that we accomplish and the work that we do, because sometimes we tend to nag ourselves really a lot about the things not accomplished, the things on the to-do list, the I wish I would get to this, and it's also good to celebrate our accomplishments. So I'm glad that you
Yes.
touched on that. Alexandria,
Thank
it's been a pleasure talking with you, and I hope that we stay connected and that we keep coming up with opportunities to do advocacy together.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
And this has been another episode of Empowered Trans Woman, and I hope to see you all soon.